We can talk dynasty buys and dynasty sells, but the real key to winning dynasty trades is understanding when to tier up and when to tear down. I'm going to be joined by the dynasty trading expert to talk through the tactics around tiering up, tearing down, and of course, we'll run through some live trades as well. Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Sanctuary. That is right. It is trading season. Anytime we have a trade show, you know I'm always reaching out to Russ to get him on board. Russ, how are you doing today?
I am just thrilled to be here.
Well, we were talking before the show about just how busy you are with everything. Scott Fishbowl and Fantasy Cares going on at the moment, so I greatly appreciate you taking the time to talk through some trades, particularly some tearing up, tearing down. So, before we dive into it, is this a tactic that you kind of like to do when you're, I guess, trying to look at making some offers and how to adjust and tweak your dynasty rosters?
Oh, like this is key here. Like, there's always trades where it's, well, I have all these running backs, let me get a wide receiver. There's, well, I have this one guy I really like that I like just getting and trading for on all my teams. So you find ways to do that. But like when you are legitimately working on your roster, with your roster in mind, this is absolutely the way you have to go about it. It's a way to keep yourself on track using pretty much what you have in front of you without, this keeps you in line almost, which I know we'll get into later. So I don't want to get too in depth with it, but depending on your league settings, this, it depends on which direction you're going to go in. But yes, tiering is absolutely just the best way to handle either really just strengthening your roster, but how you need to go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I like to think about my dynasty rosters as kind of stock market and specific values and pools of values in positions and things like that. And to me, tearing up and tearing down is a way of either sharing out some of that value away from a position of strength and trying to balance out the rest of my roster, or potentially consolidating 4 or 5 shares into a more expensive share and going about it that. So I think, we'll dive in and we'll talk about the nuances and stuff, but we're going to start with tearing up. So for you, is there any specific situation in terms of your roster, what you're looking at when you pull up that sleeper or MFL team page as to thinking, right, this is where I need to be tearing up?
A lot of it. Okay, so I'll first start with tiering up is something you just always want to do, especially when you have smaller starting lineup sizes. My standard is 12-team leagues, and we usually start 10 players. To where at that point you need a lot of players. Starting 10 players when there's 12 teams, it could get kind of tough every once in a while. But when you get a little lower down, you get to 10 teams, or you only have to start 8 or 9. It makes more and more sense to have every one of your starters be as studly as possible. So that's when tiering up really, really comes into play. But also, it's really funny. Like, you use the phrase, do you use depth or picks? The answer is obviously both, or whatever you have to. But I hate having depth on my teams, mostly because I hate making decisions because I'm bad at them. So like I never pick the right person to start. So take the decision out of my hands. So like if I can start 4 wide receivers, but I have 5 good ones, I'm going to throw 2 of them together to go tier up to get me a better one. So I only have to start 4 wide receivers. I only have 4 wide receivers that I can start. So, that's my biggest tiering up is usually when your team is pretty set, you want to compete and you have either too many pieces or just not the right pieces for your specific lineup. Like, my leagues are all minimum of start 1 at each position and then everything else is a flex. But like if you have to start 2 running backs, but you have 4 that are all very startable, like I get that keep away is a little bit of a strategy, but I don't have the patience, or like I see this value on my bench and I just need to do something about it. So if you need to start 2, but you have 4, like why not at least take 2 of them, put them together, so you have 2 very good starters and one that like is a good replacement for when you need them. So like that's tiering up. That's really what it's about. To me, tiering up is more of competing. I have my roster. I'm ready to go. Like, you don't usually tier up in like a full-on rebuild unless you have like a mountain of second round picks and like players you drafted in that area. Like, because you'll usually not really compete if you're stuck with that many of that level of players. So you'll start taking all of those guys you drafted in the second and try and get someone that was drafted in the first, metaphorically.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. There is that the one time I guess I try and tier up in a rebuild is potentially where I've got 9, 10 draft picks in a draft. I might try and move 4/3 for a good second, or try and move 3 seconds for a first, just because realistically, am I going to want 10, 12 rookies on my roster? Can I consolidate those and try and go and get a stud or a higher priced player to go and do that in that rebuild situation? But I agree with you, it is more of a win now thing, because you're basically trying to get better players, essentially, aren't you? Let's be honest, that's what tiering up is. So you're trying to say, I want more points on my roster rather than these 2 average guys. Can I go and get a stud? Or 3 average guys, can I go and get a stud?
I will say though that even if you are rebuilding, like, you need those cornerstone pieces to build around. You want that Justin Jefferson, that Jalen Hurts, that young, very good player. And if you came through this rookie draft and you got like Xavier Legette, Ricky Pearsall, Roman Wilson, these guys drafted in the, maybe end of first through like the end of the second. And like, you're okay, well, I have a lot of this. Like, maybe you would throw 2 of them to go try and get Xavier Worthy, or you're probably not, no matter how many of those guys you package, you're not getting yourself up to Neighbors or a Dunze, right? But like, if you can package 2 of them up and go get Brian Thomas Jr., again, I'm trying to use very relevant young names right now, but like, this isn't just this year, it's anytime ever. Like, if you have so many of those lower tier players, but you need to build around some guys that are dependable, are more talented, and have the ability to be worth more in general, even if you do plan to flip them later. That's another time, though. Even though you're rebuilding, tiering up does still make sense at times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of ties in perfectly to the show we did last week with Yaga May, where we talked about, just because you're rebuilding, you don't have to tear every single asset off your roster. Actually, sometimes
follow Jagger. That's not cool at all. He's so good.
Yeah, keep some of those good assets, because you shouldn't be in a 3-4 year rebuild. Like, that's just it. Nothing should ever take that long, and the reason it is because you've stripped every asset off the roster. So I love that. And I guess this is something I'm trying to think more of, is we talk about Dynasty in these vacuums, but actually I think we go through cycles through the 12-month period of the year, in terms of there's different times and different periods of when certain players are more expensive and certain players are less expensive. Is there a time where you're more likely to try and tier up rather than, are you thinking now, right, now's a good time to tier up because everybody's only looking at their starting lineups and nobody's worrying about depth? Or are you trying to tier up in season because there's more teams potentially looking to tank and rebuild and that kind of thing? Or is it a case of you're just trying to do it 12 months of the year?
I'll take the easy answer and say 12 months of the year. But like, it's funny. It's a very double-edged sword when it comes to trades for a competing team, because especially like, I don't like running backs. Like, that's no secret at all. Like, they scare me. I don't like them.
I think, let's be honest, it feels like nobody in the Dynasty community likes running backs. I feel like I've yet to find anybody who produces Dynasty content who likes running backs. If you are one, please reach out, because I'd love to have a chat with you.
Few and far between. But like, the thing is, like, on a competing team, you need running backs, right? Like, that's just the way it works. And but even in any position, it's tough, because the cheapest you will find, aging veterans and competing players, players that score points, the cheapest they'll ever be is in the non-point scoring season, because nobody cares about points. It's the furthest from our minds. But also, when you do that, you're usually hurting the dynasty value of your team. But also, especially when it comes to running backs, you're taking on a lot of injury risk. Like, you're taking on a lot of risk by putting age on your team, by getting some youth, getting some picks off of your team. But you're right. Now is the cheapest you can do it. So it does make sense to do it now anyway. But I also, this isn't the specific situation, but I am always willing to pay the wait and see tax. Like I am very risk averse when it's really funny. Like usually people that trade like I do, just like caution to the wind and go nuts. Like I am terrified of, well, everything really ever. But like, you know, like whenever there's players that I like, and maybe they'll be good, you know, like I'll wait to see what they do in the league before I trade for them. And I'm willing to spend that extra I'll have to wait and see if they really are good. Like I love Xavier Worthy and Brian Thomas Jr. Like this is the end of the first is my happy place. It's just like in 2020 with Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle. Like I love the end of the first. But after rookie drafts, I'm not trading for those two because, you know, you usually have to pay a little bit more after the draft already happens. And because it's more than a draft pick risk at this point. I don't have the 110 that I'm using to draft one of those players. I'm trading something on my team that I am giving up to go get these guys. And if they're bad, like that's like a double loss. I lost what I had on my team and then I lose, I lose a roster spot to a bad player, I guess. So like I am absolutely willing to wait into the season to see that they're good and to actually trade for them. So again, while now is the time, like if you believe in the Keenan Allens and Devontae Adams, Mike Evans of the world, now is the best time ever to go get them because people want sexy rosters right now because points don't matter. But again, like I like sexy rosters too. And like bringing on the age on my roster, like it's ingrained in my skull that in the non-point scoring season, dynasty value is all that matters. And these guys don't carry a lot of dynasty value. They carry a whole lot of fantasy value. Like their points value is immense. So again, double-edged sword in how you want to play. But if you're the kind of person that looks at your lineup in June, go get all of these guys. Get Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley. Well, Christian McCaffrey, you should always get Christian McCaffrey. He's the guy that doesn't count. Like whenever you say, oh, they could be the running back one this year. Well, they could be the running back one after Christian McCaffrey. Like, no, that's Christian's spot. But like, yeah, like go get these guys that score points right now. And I'm not saying playing like that is wrong. I'm just saying it's not the way I play. But you're right. I'm going to say one last time, just because I ramble far too much. You're right. Now is the cheapest players who score points but are old or second or third on their team. Then now's the cheapest you'll ever get them because points are far from people's minds.
Yeah, I think it's something I've been toying with over the past few months, and I've not fully come up with I've really wrapped my head around quite what I think, but I think there's an advantage to be made in the off season where people are almost only looking at their rosters in best case scenarios.
Yes.
And I find this particularly in Superflex leagues at quarterback because in June, July, so many teams are carrying two quarterbacks and are happy to go and tier up for two stud quarterbacks, but then are willing to carry the risk of not having a QB3 because in the off season there are no injuries, there's no bye weeks, there's things like that. And I guess maybe that's the perfect segue into kind of tiering down, is that I can't get my head around what the right approach is to try and take advantage of people who are viewing, we'll call it rose tinted glasses or whatever you want, in terms of their dynasty rosters. But do you think that there's potentially a window now where you could look at tiering down and scooping up significant value because people have got that narrowed approach and aren't having to, tick boxes next to people's names at the moment?
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of it comes to, the word that's in the title of it is tiers. Like quarterbacks, like just like you said, my top tier, I have three quarterbacks, Allen, Mahomes, and Hurts in whatever order. I mean, Allen is my one, but whatever order you want to put them in, that's fine. The next tier is rather large, and it's like, Lamar, Kyler, Stroud, Herbert's still up there, even though I'm a little worried. Completely blanking. Burrow. I should probably have a list of players in front of me whenever I start listing players, because there's always that one guy I always forget, and I feel like a jerk about it a couple seconds later.
I'm going to be slightly offended if you're not going to include Trevor Lawrence and Jordan Love, but
well, I love me some Trevor Lawrence so much. I'm waiting for it to all click together. And Jordan Love, he's fine, but they're both top of the third tier for me. But like, if I love Kyler Murray, I've gotten crazy acquiring Kyler Murray across my leagues. And if I do have plenty of Jalen Hurts shares, but also like if I have Lamar Jackson shares or Justin Herbert shares or Joe Burrow, and I know that most people will value those players above Kyler Murray, like why not see if I can trade Justin Herbert for Kyler Murray? And like you're not going to get a lot on top, but like you can get a second out of that. You can get a young wide receiver too out of that. Like it's a beautiful way to a if you do like let's say you lost out on like a player that retired or some like I mean we don't have a good example like because Darren Waller wasn't helping anyone, but like someone that retired or someone that got hurt or got in somehow much worse of a situation, and all of a sudden you went from having 10 starters to 9. You can tear down at one of these positions, like going from Justin Jefferson to Amon-Ra St. Brown. You could probably get a first amount of value on top of Amon-Ra St. Brown, but you're not losing all that many points. And then you can get another starter to throw in your roster. Like it absolutely, or again, just a pick to help raise the dynasty value of your roster. Tearing down, to me, there's no timing. Like tearing down, unless again you are in the situation like we were talking before, like unless you are locked in with the amount of players you have, the specific players you have, then there's no point in tearing down. Like there's no reason to do it for the sake of doing it. But if your team is not like 100% nailed in, locked into place, this is a beautiful way to add value because you can turn. It's all about cascading moves, right? You go from Justin Herbert to Kyler Murray in a second, and then you go and you throw Devonta Smith and a second to go get all I have is Amon-Ra St. Brown's name is stuck in my head, but that's not a trade that's going to happen. But the reality of the situation is kind of blanking me at the moment. Like, but then you use that extra piece to go tier up a different piece. Like it's never one, like use the phrase in a vacuum. It's never one move in a vacuum. It is always what it does to the value of your roster and what you can do with it next. And again, I always have to throw in the caveat, assuming you have an active league, because I mean, my leagues are titled the Trade Addicts League. So I know that there could always be a next move. But if you have those leagues where you're going to get like 2 done a season, lock them in a little bit more, like only make very purposeful trades. But like if you have an active enough league, then tearing down is great because all it does is give you more assets to then trade with.
Yeah, and I think there's almost potentially 2 different avenues of tearing down. And you talked about them both there. There's the move from Justin Jefferson to Amon-Ra St. Brown, where you're getting a significant piece, and that piece you can go and use, to go and get another player to tier up somewhere else or whatever. And I think that those moves are great, but I think people almost, when they talk of tearing down, that's the move that they think of, is getting significantly worse at one position to get better somewhere else. But actually, I think the move you talked about perfectly at the beginning when you were talking about your quarterbacks, you've identified that you are higher than consensus on Kyler Murray. So therefore, for you, making a sideways move from another tier 2 quarterback to Kyler Murray, in your eyes, it's not a tier down at the position, but you're getting an asset on top to make that move. And I think that it's probably easier for the likes of yourself or myself who are producing rankings and values and things like that and producing content. So can I can pull up my trade values, go to DLF ADP and say, right, okay, I'm higher than consensus on this person. But anybody who doesn't produce those rankings or lists, you can still go and pull up an ADP list and say, right, okay, I'm probably higher than consensus on these guys. You know a feel for the players that you like more than most people seem to. And then you can look at, okay, can I go and move, for me, what one of those guys at the moment seems to be Kyren Williams. So for me, I would quite happily move from Jamar Gibbs to Kyren Williams. I see that as a relatively small move in my trade values. But I know that based on consensus, I can go and get a significant piece on top of Kyren Williams to go and tear down from Jamar Gibbs. So that's a move that I'm happy to make, that I think some people would be like, that's a significant move down in terms of player value. But for me, it's not. So I can probably go and get a good second, if not more, on top of Kyren Williams. And I feel like I'm not losing much from the player value perspective. So I think that's almost a slightly different way to look at it. And yeah, it is easier when you, as I said, you're producing rankings, but anybody can go and pull up a list of ADP, or indeed use another analyst that you trust, use their rankings, and then go and pull up versus ADP. It's very straightforward.
But also, every league is its own marketplace. Like, assuming you've been in this league for an extended period of time, like, how people feel about certain players. Like, imagine what you can get trading down from any of those quarterbacks we listed before to Dak Prescott. Like, I wrote the trading post article for DLF on Dak Prescott last week, and he's so cheap, but all he does is scores top 10 QB every single year, in and out. Like, so you can get so much on top of these big brand, fancy, sexy names, but still go get a whole lot of points. Like this, like you said, only in a rebuild. No, not at all. Like, there's a lot of very cheap players that score a lot of points. Like, we kind of talked about it before when we were talking about those aging players, the Mike Evans and the Devontae Adams. Like, you can tear down from like these sexy named players, the Drake Londons and the Chris Olaves, who, man, if they don't have good seasons this year, their value will most likely tank pretty far down. But you can get these super safe guys that are going to score you some points for another year or two and still win your league, which is, in the end, the goal, right? Like, you want to win, and that's a way to do it while increasing the dynasty value of your team as well, because we're not killing the dynasty value of your team, I should say, because you're hurting it a little by getting these older guys, but like, you're probably also getting a nice pick, or, make sure what the other player you get is a young player, so you're not completely aging your roster out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that age adjustment is perfect at the running back position. I think we're still slightly too age obsessed at running back, and running back is such a short shelf life. You can get, I think Derrick Henry is going ahead of Rashad White in, he's going 2 rounds ahead of Rashad White in best ball drafts right now in redraft. But in Dynasty, Rashad White is significantly more valuable than Derrick Henry. So you can, tear down from Rashad White to Derrick Henry, potentially have a better point scorer for 2024, and get an asset that can help you for the future to replenish those stocks. So yeah, I think adding in the age, kind of tearing down, is a really interesting way. But I feel like we've flirted around this question without answering it, Russ. But are there any particular positions that you like tearing down? Are there any positions that you're trying to avoid them moving around in tiers, or is it a case of every and all?
Every and all. There's no reason to not do it at any specific position, assuming the players you want to do that with are available in that specific league. I won't look at this and say, oh, I'm not going to do that at running back. But I mean, why not? If you can walk away with the right amount of points and the right amount of value, why not do it? I mean, it's absolutely a viable strategy regardless of position.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think regardless of position, it's perfect. I think there are certain positions that kind of lend themselves to more, and it's those smaller positions. Quarterback, it is very easy to look at it and say, right, I can tear up in here, because yes, it's the onesie position. There's fewer of them, but I think also with most rankings and values, there's a little bit more consensus around things like quarterback and tight end, whereas I feel like there's a lot more variety, particularly at wide receiver, but also at running back. So you can almost plan those moves out a little bit easier in a generic league at quarterback or tight end than you can perhaps at wide receiver or a running back. Before we get on to talking some real life trades, though, if you are watching this, we are closing in on 2,300 subscribers. Hit that little button down below. Hit the thumbs up while you're there. It's best ball season. Tommy's absolutely killing it with all his live streams, and we've got more Dynasty content coming every single week. So we're going to throw some real trades at you, Russ. We're going to give you a player. I'm going to give you a tier up option, a tier down option. In this scenario, you're a middle of the table team. You can't decide whether you want to kind of push him for a title or sit back. So you're sat there with Drake London. You've got the option. You can go and add the 112 to him to go and get CeeDee Lamb, or you can tear down and get Zay Flowers and add the 112 in this year's draft. I would say all of these trades are from the DLF Trade Analyzer, so that's the value we're using. which way are you going here? You going to get CD, or are you adding Zay Flowers in that little asset?
See, this is rough because, like I already said, that I love the back end of round one, and assuming this is super flex,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
even after those wide receivers, you have Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson, who I'm a big fan of both of them, especially in their landing spots. That being said, when you can get CeeDee Lamb for what feels like Drake London and a dart throw, you have to do that. CeeDee Lamb is a tier 1 wide receiver who finally was just, he's like, see this doubt you had of me? Gone. They're like, he removed all doubt. He is a tier 1 wide receiver, because I firmly believe that if you change your mind in a couple of days and you're like, you know what, I think I really needed those 2 players instead of just that one, you can do better than Drake London in the 112 when you want to get rid of CeeDee Lamb at some point. Zay Flowers is a little bit of he's at a risk. He's good. He's fine. Like, there's no ceiling to Zay Flowers for me. And the 112, again, is a little bit of a crapshoot. Like, to me, it doesn't make sense to trade away from one risk to safe and risk. That's, like I said, I don't even like risk. I'm terrified of it, but like, that one makes no sense to me. The Zay Flowers and the 112. Like, if I'm gonna risk it, I might as well go with a risk that has some ceiling to it. And Zay Flowers in the 112 to me doesn't really have it. So just give me CeeDee Lamb here. This feels pretty easy to me.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I'm the biggest CeeDee Lamb fan there is. So yeah, this was an easy one for me. I agree with you. I think the other thing to remember with someone like CeeDee Lamb is the second he signs that monster extension,
And he'll get
his dynasty value is only going to go up. So you've almost got a small spike guaranteed in the next, let's hope the Cowboys actually sign of someone to an extension over the next 3 months. But if not, it's coming at the end of the season. So there's a kind of incubated value spike in there, I think, over the next few months for sure. We're gonna talk about the guy. Look, you talked about your dynasty trading post, so we had to throw in Dak Prescott trade here. So you can move from Dak Prescott. You're adding a future first and a future second to go and get the dynasty darling that is CJ Stroud. Or you can move down from Dak Prescott to go and get Will Levis, a future first and 2 future seconds.
Oh, man. I would literally start dancing if I could trade Will Levis a 25 first and 2 25 seconds to get Dak Prescott out of it. Like, literally be dancing. See, the problem with me is I don't like either of these. I would love to send CJ Stroud and get Dak Prescott. I think you should actually be able to get more than a first and a second out of that. That being said, that means I feel like if I had to pick one of these, it would be for Stroud. And again, it's mostly because of the player involved. Like, I like the idea of Will Levis. I love that the Titans are surrounding him with talent. I love Calvin Ridley in the first place. But like, if you have to have a quarterback who's has the propensity to close his eyes and throw the ball really hard, really far, it might as well be to DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley. Like, they're 2 very, very good players, not to mention bringing in Tyler Boyd and, 2 good pass catching running backs. So I think they're giving him all the chance in the world to show that he can be their guy. That being said, I don't have that much faith in the talent of the player. Like, I love him as a human being. Like, I will never forget, CJ Stroud and Bryce Young aren't throwing at the combine. Why are you? I got a rocket. Like, yeah, you do. Good guess. That's right. Yeah. So I get it. And like, that's fine, and especially like Dak's only 30, 31. Like, so you don't need to age down. Like, even if you're rebuilding, Dak's not that old. But like, if you needed to age down, I feel like the value of Levis in a first and a couple of seconds isn't terrible. But I would feel safer if it was, like if it was Bryce Young. Like, honestly, like I at least believe in the talent of Bryce Young more than Will Levis. And the Panthers have also started actually surrounding him with talent of under 40 years old. I mean, sorry, Adam Thielen, but yeah. The value, I think, though, like Dak in a first, 25 seconds don't mean super much to me. Like, that's what I use when I'm like, oh crap, my running back got hurt and I need to go get Joe Mixon. Like, that's what I have my 25 second for, but so they don't hold super much value for me. So like, if I can get CJ Stroud for Prescott a first and a second, I would do that over the other one. But if I am rebuilding, I'm pretty okay with the trade down.
Yeah, I mean, I, I feel like CJ Stroud is overvalued right now, so
Yes,
I don't love paying up for CJ Stroud because I feel like this is, there's not much room for his value to go up because I
I would
don't know if he's ever going to break
absolutely
into that top three.
springboard this into getting Trevor Lawrence plus for CJ
Yeah,
Stroud. Like this absolutely wouldn't be the last move. Like if I had Dak Prescott and someone just sent me this offer, it would be one of those. I would be texting my friends like, I kind of have to take this, don't I? I don't want to, but I kind of have to, right?
you're
And
almost
then
trying to
figure
work
it
the
out
second
later.
trade before you hit accept.
Yeah, like so like this is that's a trade I would do just because I think the value is so much on the Stroud side that again I would flip Stroud for something I liked better,
Yeah,
but again like I like that you're getting multiple seconds if you're tearing down to Will Levis, you know the first won't probably be that great, especially when someone's getting the quarterback upgrade from Levis to Prescott, who, like I said, all he does is score points. But still, you're getting a first out of it. You're gaining 10 years at quarterback. I mean, not really. It's probably like 6, but that's still a lot. And if Levis does work out, he's not going to be a top 10 dynasty quarterback. But if he finishes as a solid, he moves up to QB 14 to 16 ish at the end of the season, like that's a real big victory for him. And I think it's in the realm of possibility. Like why not? Again, with the talent that's around him and what's going to be now an actual passing offense. So I don't dislike. Like the more I talk about it out loud, the less I dislike the Will Levis trade. But again, the value for CJ Stroud here, and also agreeing that he is overvalued,
yeah,
leans me towards the Stroud trade.
yeah. And I think that Will Levis is undervalued. I think at the moment. I think there is an outcome where you said he could become a reliable fantasy starter. They've thrown resources around him. That Titans offense could be hopeful. And I kind of think that as you said, that value is pretty good. But I guess it would depend on my roster situation. Like if Dak Prescott's my QB2 and I'm tearing down to Will Levis, I don't like it. If
Oh,
he's my
this needs to be a
QB3,
full-on rebuild move. Like
yeah,
you need
if
to be
he's
giving up to
yeah,
pull this kind of move.
yeah, if as you said, I'm in a rebuild, or maybe I've got Josh Allen and then I've got a reliable QB2 in like
Yeah,
Kirk
fair
Cousins, and I'm
enough.
like,
Like, yeah,
okay,
you don't
let's go and
need
shoot
Dak on your team. Yeah.
for the moon. Then I can go and do that. But yeah, well, let's look at the running back positions. We're both self-appointed running back haters, so let's talk some running backs. So Devon Achane seems slightly divisive at the moment in the community. You can attach a 110 to go up and get Breece Hall, or you can move back and get, that move we talked about earlier. You can get Derrick Henry, who's a similar range in redraft value, but you can add on that late first. Which way are you going?
Like you had to pick Breece Hall. Like he's my weak spot when it comes to top tier running backs. I really do like him. But I think I actually do take the Derrick Henry one on this one because to me, running backs are a very 1-year asset. And Achane is super risky. Like he worries me. And gotta be honest, like there were a couple teams where I tried to move him during rookie drafts, and the best I could get was like the 111. I mean, I didn't take it because that's ridiculous, but that's all I was able to like actually get offered. But I love the idea of how many points Derrick Henry can score this year. Like I am all in on this Ravens offense right now. And Derrick Henry, I will not believe, like, I don't think there's such thing as slowing down for Derrick Henry. Like one day his god of a body is just going to stop working. Like that seems like what it's going to be because that man isn't human. Like, I mean, I feel like he's proven that already. Like he'll be 43 and just be like, oh no, my legs fell off. I'm done now. Like, so I love the idea of like, this is what we said before. You're aging up for sure. You're still going to get a whole lot of points, but then you get that draft pick to stay young, to stay more dynasty value solvent. Like again, even if you don't want to draft with that 110, you can flip that 110 plus, use that 110 in some of the other tier up trades we were talking about. Use that 110 to go from Will Levis to Dak Prescott and get those extra points at quarterback as well. Like I think while I do love me some Breece Hall, and again, I think that's actually pretty good value for Breece, I think I actually do choose the tier down trade on this one.
Yeah, I feel like I'm agreeing with you on all of these, but I personally don't like going out and acquiring running backs at the top of their value. And I love Breece Hall. I'm a Jets fan. I feel like Breece Hall is one of my he is my most rostered running back that I've got. But a lot of that was drafted Breece Hall rather than going out and acquiring Breece Hall, because sending those assets of, yes, okay, it's a late first, but it's still a first and a chain to go up and put it all in one running back, that makes me nervous. So yeah, I feel like I would almost always tear down at the running back position, particularly if I feel like I'm getting sideways in terms of points production for this season, which I think you're doing from a chain to Henry. So the final move, of course, we got you on, Russ. We had to talk T. Higgins. And you're not allowed to just keep T. Higgins here. You have to trade him away. Those are the rules. Okay. So you can get T. Higgins, you add the 104 to go and get Jamar Chase, or you can tear down and get Jaden Reed and a late second.
I hate both of these so much.
Does that say more about your T. Higgins valuation than?
Oh, absolutely, yes, 1,000%. Like, because in reality, T. Higgins worth a bit of a later first, and later first in the 104 for Jamar Chase feels like a win. I really actually like Jaden Reed also. While I don't think the Green Bay wide receiver core has the guy there, like, they are set, like, they moneyballed the wide receiver. Like, they have a bunch of guys that are good. Like, they don't have an X, they don't have an Alpha, they don't have a, target hog. They don't have any of that. So it's going to be a little frustrating as the season goes on, like week to week, as to who is that guy that week that gets the most targets. But I think I've seen enough from Jaden Reed to think that he's probably the best wide receiver they have right now. So, like, I mean, I wish it was an earlier second than the 212 value right there. But, like, if you told me that Jaden Reed and T. Higgins, like, Jaden Reed scored 80% of T. Higgins' points, I'd probably say there's a very likely chance that happens, and especially when you're talking about that lowish 200 points, like, we're talking like 30 points over an entire season is not like 2 points a game. Like, it's nothing, So I would absolutely, like, when you're not talking about top tier wide receivers, the answer is usually tier down. And while I love T. Higgins, something fierce, he's not a top tier dynasty or fantasy wide receiver. I get that. So to me, it's always going to be tier down here. It's going to be get that almost exact level of production, but get some value along with it. And well, here you're not going to be thrilled with anything you draft at the 212. But again, it's something you could use to, go from like an Aaron Jones to a Derrick Henry and go get more points on your roster. Or like you said before, if that gives you 3 seconds, try and see if you could turn those 3 seconds to a late first. Try and use it to do something else with your team. Going, especially T. Higgins in such an early draft pick, like, I would rather just have T. Higgins and Malik Neighbors on my team than to go spend them and get Jamar Chase. Like, that really just happens to be very specific for me because I love T. Higgins. I really like the idea of Malik Neighbors, not to mention, like, who else is getting targets on the Giants right now. Like, I love Wan'Dale Robinson, but, like, the dude needs to stay on the field for more than 20 minutes, but Jalen Hyatt ain't it. Darren Waller's gone. Allen Robinson isn't going to happen. I mean, like, I'm trying to remember who else is even there anymore. I know, like, Sterling Shepard's not. Is Darius Slayton still there? I don't even know anymore.
Yeah,
like,
Slayton's re-signed. They've redone.
Okay, there you go. So, like, maybe, like, but still, like, while I understand having a player like Jamar Chase on your team feels like gold, and it absolutely is. He's so good. Like, I lost my cool when the Bengals drafted Jamar Chase. I really, really did, because I wanted T. Higgins to be the guy there. And one more year of that not being the case because he just signed his franchise tag. T. Higgins did. But yeah, like, when we're talking about not top tier wide receivers, the answer is almost always tier down for me, unless we're talking about players that are almost similar valued but have that hype on them. Like, going back to the Drake London, to me, the real value between Drake London and T. Higgins shouldn't be that different. But it is because of age and potential that we haven't seen from Drake London yet. We've seen what T. Higgins is going to be in his current situation. We haven't seen what Drake London is going to be in his current situation. And, if T. Higgins did change teams this year, like, if he ended up going to, man, I wanted him on Jacksonville so bad, like, to get that Clemson reunion. Like, if he ended up being the guy in Jacksonville, I think he would be worth that Drake London value tier. but he stayed in Cincinnati, and then next year he's just going to be 1 year older, and then we're going to start calling him old because we're ridiculous at this point. So like in this level, it's almost always tier down for me, unless it's pure value based, which to me, like, that's what Drake London is.
Yeah, I think that if you're sending T. Higgins and the 104 to go and get Jamar Chase, you better be absolutely loaded in the rest of your roster, and that better be the final piece that you need
to
win
go.
the title.
Yeah, you got to be good to go.
Because that is an incredibly aggressive move to, you know, let's not say elite, but very, very good assets for one elite one. That is very much an aggressive all-in move. Look, I'm a massive Jalen Reed fanboy. I think he's significantly undervalued. Sorry.
Yes.
But I don't know if the 212 is enough for me to make that move. I agree with
you. Like I said, I think, and it's not that far. Like just to be able to see 2-0, not 2-1. Like if it was like not the 209, but if it was like the 206, and you can still walk away with
maybe,
like in the
maybe it's a 25 second rather than the 212.
Exactly, because
you know
it's
that
not
mystery box. Yeah, there's that mystery box element where it could be the 212, but it could be the 201. But yeah, I agree with you. I just don't like trading for that 212 because to me it's essentially a third round pick, and to me third and fourth round picks are meaninless. So yeah, absolutely. Well, that's it. I said we'd finish on a T. Higgins trade, and indeed we have, Russ. So thank you ever so much for taking your time to jump on. Remind everybody watching where can they find you, where can they find your work, and obviously where can they find all about Fantasy Cares at the moment?
Well, I mean, I do far too much stuff. Trade Addicts podcast, Dynasty Wall Street, Dynasty Game Night, the DLF Trade show on the DLF YouTube channel. And every so often, whenever my wife falls asleep early, I show up on the grind on Peter Howard's YouTube on Wednesday nights. But fantasycares.org is the huge everything right now. Scott Fishbowl is still loading up, still plenty of spots left to give out. So follow at fantasycares.org on everything: YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Just Fantasy Cares on Facebook, though, because I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing when I set it up. But the fun thing we started now is we started a sticker of the month club. So fantasycares.org/stickers. You can join our sticker of the month club, where you can get from 1 to 3 stickers mailed to your house at the beginning of every month.
Delightful. Absolutely delightful. And go and check out the YouTube channel. They're doing fantastic stuff. Plenty of giveaways, plenty of fun games. It feels like you're just sitting with friends and family. It's always great fun. So
if you are looking to get into Scott Fishbowl still, that is the easiest way right now to get a spot. Is almost every time we go live, we end up giving away a spot to someone in the audience. So if you're still trying to get in, first of all, just being present, in the situation, in the Fantasy Cares world, is a great way to get on the radar to get in. But also, we give away spots a lot of the time. So be in our Twitters, be in our YouTube shows, and all of that fun stuff.
It's like watching Oprah back in the day. You get a spot, you get a spot, you get a spot. Just throw them around everywhere. Awesome. Well, thank you ever so much. If you haven't hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button right now, and we'll be back very soon for more Dynasty content.